Welcome in the latest episode of the Five on the Floor podcast on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We're temporarily calling it 5 off the floor. We've actually got 4 off the floor on today's special episode. Make sure you check out all of the content in our network, and that means starting with 5reasonsports.com. Spell it out. We've got Heat content that's going up there today, but we've been doing a ton of Dolphins free agency stuff. We've actually had some of our biggest days on the website. So we know you're bored, and we are free. We don't have a paywall. So just go check out everything we're doing, and also the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel with a very popular show by our Dutch called I Got Nothing, among other programming that's there over at the YouTube channel. And also the other podcasts in our network, 3 Yards Per Carry, 5 Rings Canes, with new episodes over the past couple of days. And Light Skinned Opinions, where I'm the lightest skinned person to ever appear. My appearance in that episode is out this week. All right, check out also the sponsors in our network. One of them, of course, is the Seltzer-Mayberg Law Firm. You can find them at onecalllegal.com. That's ONE. Calllegal.com. They're there for you 24 hours a day to handle any legal issue you have. Yes, I know the courts are closed right now, but they will not be closed forever. So make sure that you check out whatever it is that you need to deal with, whether it's immigration, slip and fall, traffic tickets, anything at all. The Seltzer-Mayberg Law Firm will handle it. They're based right there in North Miami, just south of the Golden Glades. Again, the website is onecalllegal.com. Spell it out, ONE, calllegal.com. And yes, they're working. They're on remote right now, but they're working. All right, today's episode.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a Miami Heat and NBA podcast from Ethan Skolnick with Alphonse Sidney, a.k.a. Alf954. Brought to you by the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, Ethan Skolnick back, and I've been saying that we're going to continue to produce content here on the network. I mean, that is what we're here for. We have nothing else to do. We'll get into that in a second, what everybody's doing. I'm unemployed to begin with, but the 3 guys here on this podcast are not, but temporarily. So we're gonna get into that. So obviously, we will also want to provide your coronavirus updates as they apply to Broward, Dade, and Palm Beach counties. I'll be doing that on the 5 Reasons Sports account, and then pissing everybody off on the Ethan J. Skolnick account. All right, we always are looking for like pegs right now, like reasons to do a podcast, right? So the other day it was, the Heat, had interest in DeMar DeRozan at the deadline. Okay, we're going to do a whole pod on that. Well, today, Pat Riley helped us because he turned 75. And so we figured this is a good opportunity to get into Pat's career in 2 different ways. One, where he's been with the Heat. I'm not really going to get into the Lakers, the Knicks as much, but just what he's done since he was on the Carnival Imagination ship, back when cruise ships were actually used for fun and not for triage, and where it's going now that he's 75 years old and why he's still here. So I'll start, and then I'm going to get to our guests. We've got the usual, Alex Toledo. You can find him at Tropical Blanket. We've got Alphonse Sidney. You can find at Alf954. We've got Greg Sylvander, who you also know as Leif, but also at Greg Sylvander. If I'm going to define the Riley, and we're all going to define sort of his legacy here in Miami, if I'm going to define it, it is consistency. To me, that's the word that comes up. And I don't mean that in terms of results, because obviously it's been ebbs and flows. You had, the build to basically, a team that was supposed to try to take down Jordan. It never did because the Knicks kept getting in the way, but a competitive team that made basketball matter in this market. That was the late 90s, Timmy, Zoe, Mash, Marley, etc. Then you had Zoe's unfortunate illness, but coming out of that, another build after a little bit of a down period with Dwayne Wade, and then the build to Shaq. And then after that fell apart for a variety of reasons, then obviously the build with Dwayne as the singular star to 2010, the big 3, and what we've seen now, which is additional sort of resilience and rebuilding again. And the reason I use the word, I could have used resilience because I think that's a big part of what this organization is about, and that actually was the title of Alonzo Mourning's book. But the reason I'm using consistency is because I think the reason that the Heat are able to be resilient is because Riley is consistent. The organization is consistent. Nobody ever leaves. There are certain principles in place that, although they may be adjusted, are the basic principles that are sort of, I'm not going to use the word Heat culture, but there's sort of the Heat way, right? And so I think that consistency allows you to make mistakes like the Heat made in 16 and 17 in those summers, dramatic, big mistakes that would have set other franchises back for a decade. And instead, they really only set the franchise back a couple of steps for a couple of years. So that's what comes to mind. I'll have Riley's stories as we go forward, but that's my thing, is by keeping a consistent organization where you know everybody who's in the building, and you know if you make a mistake, you can work with these people to kind of remedy the mistake because you have been to a certain place before. And it's a conversation I had with a Heat executive earlier this year who told me to stop panicking about the situation they were in. This is before the season, because he's like, look, you remember what we did, you know, after Zoe got sick. You remember what we did after the Shaq team fell apart. Eventually, there's a build, and we figure it out because we learn from our mistakes. And to me, that's because this organization, unlike 90% of the organizations in sports, is consistent. Leif, you're the special guest today. I go to you.
Yeah, you summed it up. But if I had to think about the Riley era, and I'm really boiling it down to one buzz line, it would be never settling. And I know that obviously I'm the guy who's waving the pom-poms for Pat, and I always have been. But if you really think about it, he's rebuilt this thing 7 or 8 times, different periods where they've either retooled in a really significant way or they were building something. And I think that just over and over and over, he never has settled for just being a 4 seed or a 5 seed. And I know that there's been jokes about him settling for mediocrity when they were, you know, strapped with Hassan Whiteside and Tyler Johnson and those kind of contracts. And there's been moments like that have gone down, but you always know he's not settling for anything less than like big fish and going after those big superstar players. There's franchises in this league that are happy, like their best free agent summer ever is Malcolm Brogdon. Like that would be considered a down summer in Miami. And that is all attributed to Pat and setting the expectation from day one that it was about championships, and he stayed true to his word.
Alf?
Riley, for me, it's funny. The reason I'm a Heat fan is primarily because of Pat Riley, because I was a Laker fan growing up, and I've said that before on this pod, and every time we get messages, bandwagon, shut up. It was like 1995. I was 14 years old. Anyway, so Riley coming here after his stint with the Lakers, because Magic Johnson was my favorite player, he came down here, and, you know, being that age and not knowing a lot about the Heat, even though I'd been down here since 1988, I just, you know, I kind of just latched on and said, you know, I'll go with the flow. And then right out of the gates, he brings in Alonzo Mourning and then Tim Hardaway, and then his team becomes a perennial Eastern Conference, 1 or 2 seed. And so you just saw right from the very beginning that he swung for the fences. And to be a fan, sometimes that's all you can really ask. Like, I know it's become more popular to worry about assets and hand wring over how many draft picks your team has and all this other stuff. And everybody on Twitter knows every salary cap machination. I'm going back to the mid-'90s, late '90s as a basketball fan. I just wanted my team to try to win, try to win at all costs and go big or go home. And Riley has always maintained that. And now over the years with Andy and, they have a great scouting department, and it's you kind of seen that they've become more analytical and they've changed with the times. But at the end of the day, that Riley personality of swing for the fences each and every single time, try to win championships. Like, don't take 3, 4, 5, 6 years off just for a process of hopefully getting a high draft pick. So to me, that's kind of what embodies it. And it's, as a fan, it just, even when he does make mistakes, it's easy to go back and say, you know what, I trust him because he's gotten the fan base out of these spots before, and he can probably do it again.
Yeah, I think trust is a huge word here. And I think you have to put, before I get to Alex, you have to put the Heat in the context of the other teams in town. That is, to me, where even if you've had disagreements with Pat, and I have, and at times I've been wrong. He called me out because I was definitely wrong about the moves that were made in the offseason of 2005. I hated that offseason. I had an allegiance to Eddie Jones. I didn't like to see him going right before this team was going to take another step. But Pat saw that really Eddie wasn't a guy to get you over the top with that group, and made bold moves for guys who had checkered pasts. I mean, in terms of team basketball, like an Antoine Walker or Jason Williams, and then obviously Gary Payton towards the end of his career can be a difficult character, and Posey was kind of an unknown, and he made those moves, and I didn't like the moves, and the moves worked. But there's been other moves that haven't worked. But I do think the big thing with him is trust, and I think that if you compare it to the only other team in town that really matters, which is the Dolphins, if you look at the coach, I think there's been 11 Dolphins coaches in the time that the Heat have had 3. And it's just the constant turnover and the lack of trust, which I think finally this offseason with the Dolphins is turning a little bit. Alex, you're the youngest of the group by far. Your thoughts?
So I was literally going to say some of those exact same things you said right there. It's funny that you mentioned the 2005 teams and, that transition from the 04-05 team to 05-06. That was about the time that I became a diehard Heat fan, where I was watching every game and living and dying with the team. And so I think it's very representative of kind of, like you said it better than I ever could, about why those teams kind of represent and summarize what Pat did almost perfectly, right? He swings for the fences, like Alf said. He's always going to go for it. He's more trustworthy than, he's made the Heat way more trustworthy than all the other teams, right? That's the only thing I've ever known as Miami sports fan, is the Heat being way more successful than the other teams always letting me down. The Heat always, give me that feel good of always having a competitive team to root for, a superstar, constant success. And I think you can pretty much give a lot of that to Pat Riley if you're talking about big picture here. And I think that's really what puts him over the top, is the fact that he's kept it so consistent this whole time.
I mean, how many executives in sports are associated with one franchise at this point? Very few, right? Like, I mean, Pop is kind of an executive in San Antonio. I mean, he shares it with R.C. Buford. There's very few in
Patriots.
The NBA. The Patriots is one. I mean, in the NBA, I'm thinking, Jerry West was the Lakers for how long, and then, then gone.
And Warriors, now Clippers.
There's some young guys that are going to carve out those kinds of.
If they stay, though, Gray.
Exactly. Okay, no, you're right.
If Masai stays, like Bob Myers likely stays in Golden State, but although Jerry West had something to do with that too before he moved on again. But yeah, Masai would be one. Who else are we talking? I mean, Danny Ainge is associated with the Celtics because he played there so long, but there's Daryl Morey with Houston. I don't think so.
LeBron's probably the best executive Cleveland has ever had.
Oh,
so.
by far. I guess Sam Presti in Oklahoma City, but they have to get over the hump, which they might with the bounty of picks. They're kind of like the Dolphins, except they've been run more competently over the years. But yeah, there's just very few like Pat. All right, I want to get to one other thing. Let's think of kind of the contribution that, like, to you, what is Pat's biggest success? And I want you guys to try to think outside the box a little bit. Like, what is the most important thing he's done? And I think that most people are going to say the Big Three, 2010. I think that's the one he gets too much credit for. Because if number 3 is not here, that doesn't happen anyway. If Andy doesn't set the table for all that, that doesn't happen anyway. I think Pat was maybe 3rd or 4th most responsible for that. But the one that comes to mind for me that I don't think he gets enough credit for, and it fits with the consistency, is I know some fans aren't going to agree. I think it's the sticking by Eric Spoelstra is the one that jumps out to me, because to me, that is, when we talk about stability, continuity, consistency, like, to have a guy who's won championships like Riley, and nobody would ever say Riley was the greatest game coach in the world. That really wasn't his greatest skill set. I think Pat would admit that. But the ability to stay mostly, not all the time, there are some stories I could tell you, but to stay mostly out of the head coach's way and allow him to carve his own niche and build and sort of grow into the role while having the support of not just ownership, and Mickey deserves credit for this too, but also the man who did it at the highest level you could possibly do it, all-time top 5 greatest coach, and allow another guy to develop his own identity in there. And to me, if he hadn't done that, I don't know that the Big Three ever wins championships. Maybe you say LeBron would have gotten one, but the way that Eric got the most out of LeBron, particularly in those middle 2 years, particularly 2012, 2013, and as Eric has said many times, He would have been fired 3 times if he'd been anywhere else. Okay. You know, he would have been fired for Pat at the very beginning when LeBron came in. He would have been fired at 9-8. He would have been fired after the 2011 finals. But to me, that's one of sort of Pat's overlooked, I think, wins during his tenure.
Yeah.
Was sticking by Eric this entire time and allowing Eric then to grow and build a different kind of culture, a more developmental culture with his own coaches as they went forward. Leif.
I think part of sticking with Spoelstra is how the Riley allure is going to live way beyond Riley being the center, the face of the franchise. It is kind of having that synergy and consistency passed on to now the Spoelstra-led organization. That's a huge component to it all. And the other thing that I don't think Riley gets enough credit for is his ability to balance taking information from those around him and changing his opinion. For instance, like being convinced in drafting Dwayne Wade. That's listening to the people around you and trusting them. Trusting Spoelstra, is kind of part and parcel to that. And also then, you think of Ryan, the number one voice in the organization. He's making the final call on everything. So when you have that kind of power to make the final call, but you also have the ability to listen to those around you, I think that's an underrated aspect that Pat has had. I know there's a lot of times where it's his way or the highway, and there's, multiple scenarios like that. But I think more often than not, he's getting the consensus in the room more than maybe people give him credit for.
Alex, is there something you think Pat has gotten too much credit for or too little credit for?
Not enough credit for the 2008 draft. No, I'm playing around, but
well, Randy Funn took the brunt of that one. Although Rio, there was Rio in the second round.
Listen, man, Beasley was a gift. No, but seriously, man, I think, again, going back to 2005 and 2006 teams, I think that transition from those two teams and really just having, no other better way to say it, the balls to go from such a successful team with young players, guys that really seem to work around Wade and Shaq, to then go to that team that you mentioned before, with Antoine Walker, with Jason Williams, with James Posey. And I love that team, man. I was 9 years old when I first saw that championship team, so there's definitely a lot of bias here. But I think it really is just a perfect summation of who he was as a guy. And even though he was nowhere near perfect, it just as a GM or as an executive, as a coach, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, he makes it exciting, right? He's made it exciting for fans. He's going to go for it. And that type of team, with a bunch of guys who just wanted to win, who were towards the end of their careers, I just think it really is a perfect summation of what Riley has done.
I mean, when he traded Glenn Rice for Alonzo Mourning, and I was really, really young. I probably was 12 or something like that. I was so upset. I hated Pat Riley because he traded Glenn Rice. That was our guy for Alonzo Mourning. And immediately you could tell how much the franchise had changed when you just had this different pillar that you were relying on. And it was from that moment forward that I started saying, in Riley we trust, because it was just another example that he was coming here with a different vision, a bigger vision. And it's just over and over unfolded that way. And now we're actually seeing it again. And we're going to see it one more time before he rides off into the sunset.
Yeah, he's never made good the enemy of great. I think that's... that's been one of the strengths. But Alf, is there something he gets too much credit for, in your view?
I mean, we talked about the big three. The whole aura around him is that everything that happens within this franchise, it's his doing. So he gets too much credit for everything, right?
Right.
But you also have to give him credit for putting the right people in place, for having the right culture in place. I know you hate that word, for coming down here after his stint with the Knicks to a team that hadn't proven anything, a franchise that was in its infancy, who didn't have a huge, strong fan base, and to have the balls and the ego to just go down there and say, come down here and say, I'm going to fix all of that. Like that, I think that's kind of an underrated aspect of it, because we've seen a lot of guys with big egos go different places thinking that they could change everything, that their force of personality. I mean, we saw Bill Parcells come down here and do absolutely nothing but ride around on a golf cart. So, for Riley to come down here and just absolutely take that risk, because it was a risk because it was Bimbo Coles and Sherman Douglas, and it wasn't.
Look at some of the names he rifled through in the first 2 years too. There's some.
It wasn't a premier franchise.
No.
Walt Williams, baby.
At all.
Right. Walt Williams with the high socks. He was a pretty decent player actually, but I mean there were a lot of guys who came through here who. Were just transitional players, and it was always great because Pat would always have something nice to say about them. But you knew, okay, this guy's not going to be here very long. I think that the things he gets too much credit for are mostly the Wade-related things. That's always the way I viewed it. It's either the drafting of Wade, which I think that's been romanticized a little. I know he was on the treadmill. I get it. I know they were playing against Kentucky. I also know that there were others who were pushing for Dwayne more than he was. We can argue, but he denies the Chris Kaman. I know he denies the Chris Kaman thing. I think it was really more about Bosch, to be honest. If you remember, actually, I just want to tell this one quick one because one of the times I can remember, there's a lot of times the organization's gotten upset at me, but one of the times I got a call from somebody high up in the organization was I wrote a column at the end of when I was still at the Sun. I was at the Sun Sentinel. And I wrote a column. It was before the last game of the 2002-2003 season about how the Heat needed to lose this game. And they were going to do everything possible to lose this game. And the reason was they were trying to get up ahead of Toronto, potentially, in terms of the lottery chances, for a better chance at Bosch. Okay, not Wade. Wade was supposed to go 9th, all right, to the Bulls. That was most of the projections. And I got lit up. Okay, we don't tank, we don't try to lose it. They've admitted since they tried to lose that game on purpose. They won it. They ended up in the 5 spot. They got Dwayne instead of Bosch, and even Dwayne was not a slam dunk there. That got kind of smoothed over. But most of the things I think he gets too much credit for are Dwayne related. It was bringing in the other guys. And look, when all this was going down in 15 and 16 in the off seasons with Dwayne and the people around him were making it clear that Pat was getting too much credit for some things that were deserving, that Dwayne was deserving of. I will tell you one thing I give Pat a lot of credit for: repairing the relationship with Dwayne. Because I think as we go forward, I don't think everybody's realized how important that was. I don't not just the fact that they brought him back here, obviously, and he was able to go off into the sunset the way he wanted to go off, and they were able to have this great celebration this year. But also, I think it paved the way for a lot of other thawing, for the Bosch thawing, because Dwayne and Bosch have become very close, for the Ray Allen thawing, for all of that stuff that I think has become really beneficial for the Heat going forward as a franchise, whether it was bringing Jimmy in or some of the other things that are going to happen. I think that was a huge, huge thing. All right, so let's get to this then. Let's spin it forward a little bit. He's 75. He's there. The organization has great people with him, more than they've ever had. Okay, Adam Simon is a force in his own now, as is Shane Battier. Andy Ellisberg already has been. You've got the Arisons. Chet's still around. I know I'm missing somebody, but they're obviously Zoe's part of the front office. And when I asked Pat, when after LeBron left, when he was still bitter, when he would leave, and he basically said, I want to, get one more championship, and then, me and Chris, his wife, we're not even going to celebrate it afterwards. We're just going to get on a plane. You're not going to see us again. That's it. That's how I want to walk off. In your view, I'll start with you, Alf. What is the best send-off? A championship, obviously, but what is a satisfactory send-off for Pat Riley? When do you think he decides enough is enough? When
he lands the next big whale. I think that's what I think a transaction, even over the championship, because I think he could say, let's say he goes into 2021 and lands Giannis, and he has, it's a big three of Giannis, Bam, and Jimmy, and whatever else they can add. And listen, even if they don't win the championship that first year, I would feel like he'd be able to ride off into the sunset at that point, knowing that he left the franchise in really good shape. He could leave this summer and know that he left the franchise in fantastic shape. But I think he wants to pull the trigger on that final transaction, bring in that one guy, whether it be Bradley Beal, Giannis, who knows who we all know that Giannis is the main orca, if you will. But I think if he can just pull off that one last transaction, I think he'd be satisfied with the shape he's left the franchise in.
Alex, what's satisfactory for you?
I tend to agree with Alf. I think, even if it, the fact that he got out of that position, he helped get him out of the position that they were in, a year and a half ago, a year ago, when people were saying, bleakest future in the league, etc. I think he can write off right now and have left him in a good place. But depending on how long all of this takes with the coronavirus, right? Like by the time he comes back, he's going to be announcing his retirement. But no,
no. I mean, it's not crazy to think that. I mean, a lot of things are going to change, but I don't think that's going to happen. But I mean, they may have lost a season this year, in which case it was basically just a developmental season, right? I mean, you weren't going to win a championship anyway, so you got all this run for Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson and Kendrick Nunn, right? Like
I think
Bam
he's definitely
Adebayo.
pissed that he didn't get to see the playoffs. Iguodala and Crowder.
Yeah, the evaluation point, but you got back in the fans' good graces too, which I think is huge. And you guys know what the send-off is, and that's right directly following the championship parade in summer 2022. I mean, so
right. But that's okay.
That's the dismount.
Well, obviously, and even then, I don't think that's the dismount. I don't think he'd let it go. I don't think so. I really think if they win, he's going to want to come back and try. It's the same thing as, I mean, he was a lot younger man then, but back in 2006, where he brought back the same damn team, and that season ended with him clapping them off the floor after Luol Deng, swept them out of the first round of the playoffs. I don't think he's ever going to be able to completely distance himself. I know he said he wouldn't just go be a consultant. Maybe he would if family matters, forced him out. But I don't even know that ends it. I think he's been so re-energized by this whole process by kind of, coming back from the dead, so to speak, in terms of the evaluation. I mean, when I was running polls of him about a year ago, Leif, and we don't have a ton of time left, but when I was running polls of him, there was like 55% of the fan base that was calling him washed and wanted him gone. I mean, right now his approval rating is probably 90%, right?
It was a really good move to realize that not only the fan base, but also all of the up and coming players, all of their favorite player is Dwayne Wade. So like when you smooth that over, you did a ton and got back in the good graces of not only the fan base, but all these young players. They look up to Dwayne. He's one of their favorite Hall of Fame legends. And now the fact that they're aligned with the organization and Riley can kind of speak to his relationship with Dwayne, has huge staying power going forward.
Yeah, I think it's the most important thing he's done in the past 3 years. Honestly, I really do. All right, we're going to get to one other thing. We've got a new segment coming up on the show. We're going to introduce it here in a second. But before we do, I want to tell you about one of the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that's Dutch Valley Farms. What's Dutch Valley Farms? For starters, they're not your average cannabis grow farm. They've got deep roots in the 305, and this hometown group of doctors, CPAs, and Silicon Valley professionals have taken their talents from the 305 to the 503 to make you the finest flower out there. How does Miami find its way all the way out in Oregon? It is simple. A team with a shared belief in cannabis research and erasing the stigma behind the bud. Today, the Dutch Valley Farms crew is bringing together old school growing practices with new school tech to deliver a consistently clean, high quality experience that you can feel good about. The proof is in the plant. If you want more information, visit DutchVF.com or visit them on Instagram at Dutch Valley Farms. And I've got all this stuff for you. I've got all this Dutch Valley Farms. I got 8 T-shirts here that they sent me. So we've got to make sure that we pick those up if we're ever allowed to see each other again. Anyway, Alex, we're going to go to you. We've got something else coming up. We're going to call it The Floor is Yours. What are we doing?
Oh, you've gotten pretty good at this, just coming up with names on the fly. Very radio Ethan over here. But yeah, we've come up with this idea to pretty much try to get fans involved now that, we need content. We're going to keep putting stuff out, and we've been wanting to get 5 on the Floor fans involved for a while. I think an easy way to do that is to pretty much have a fan segment, maybe weekly, that we do on here. We get the fans involved with some prompts, with some questions, maybe a mailbag segment. Ethan, you mentioned that, maybe they wear one of the shirts, take a picture with it. Mm-hmm. It might come on the show, something like that. But I think, just introducing that whole weekly fan segment thing right now, right? Like that's, just to let everybody know this is going to happen moving forward, right? We're going to get the fans involved here. We want people to join in on the conversation. We're all in this coronavirus quarantine together. And, we just want to ramp up the conversation here and get people involved because not every other outlet can really do it in that way.
No, and like I said, we're going to be, providing more content, not less, during this. You mentioned the T-shirts. We're definitely going to do that. We've got a 5 on the Floor T-shirt on our website, and everything right now is 15% off. So if you just go to 5reasonsports.com, tap the merchandise icon, and 15% off. All you got to do is type in Miss Sports. So there's 3 S's there in the middle. Miss Sports 5. Miss Sports 5. You'll get 15% off. Alf, and basically all you got to do, buy one of those T-shirts. One of the things, we're going to do a lot of things, but one of the things we do, buy one of those T-shirts, tag us, we'll get you on the show. Okay, that I can guarantee you. We will get you on the show one way or another, either by your comments or bring you on directly. Alf, you are still, by default, the Heat Twitter president. You're imposing martial law because of the situation here in the country. So Chef Trilly cannot take your job. Are you going to be the one monitoring the fans that we bring on here, or does Leif? Leif feels like more of a Biden character to me, whereas you feel like more like a Trump character.
Wow! Don't try Leif like that.
Wow.
I don't know. Well, I don't know
if I'm supposed to say thank you or.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't have a lot of good choices, but I feel like Alf is a little more fly off the handle. Like he would have a press conference like Trump had today.
I would.
You would, except it might be warranted in your case. You're gonna participate in choosing the fans, right? You'll help us with this.
Of course. I have nothing else to do. Actually, I'm still working, so.
Yeah. How many of you are still working? I mean, I don't have a job. All I do is pay my attorney. Who actually just texted me right now, which is why I got to go. What are you doing? Leif, you working from home?
Yep, working from home, set up remotely, and hopefully we can get stores back open because this is not sustainable, we'll say.
No, it's not sustainable. I got a haircut today. I squeezed in there. They're shutting down tomorrow, so I saw Alf.
I'm shaving off this mohawk, so
yeah. Well, that's a public service. Something good came out of this. Alex, what are you? I mean, you can't drive right now, right? Like, who's driving?
Talk about unsustainable. My God. The gig economy, man, it is taking a collapse right now with everything going on. I mean, I haven't worked Uber or Lyft since Sunday, and it was already pretty risky working it last week with spring breakers. I was wiping down the car after literally every ride. It was,
and not just because of the coronavirus either. That's not just because of that.
One of many things going around, but no. But seriously, I'm just gonna have to, start doing Uber Eats. Keep coming out with these podcasts. Maybe you can still do some Uber rides in Miami.
Maybe
money coming
from life of crime.
Where are those payouts? Damn it!
Well, we need payouts. Oh, that's the other thing. We're cutting the ad prices. So check us out on 5 Reasons Sports. We gotta go. Zoom's cutting us off. They're the only people in the country making money. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.